Hey everyone, and welcome to today's Explainer. We're going to be diving into something absolutely wild today, the hidden biological blueprint that literally wires the food on your plate directly to the chemistry of your mind. It is a fascinating journey, and honestly, it's going to completely change how you look at your very next meal. So, think about this for a second. What on earth do a can of soda, your brain, and your mood all have in common? I know, it sounds like a trick question, right? But the truth is, our physical diet and our mental state are biologically inseparable. What you bite, chew, and swallow has a direct, tangible impact on the most powerful organ in your body. To understand exactly how this all works, here's our roadmap for today. We'll start with the carbohydrate connection, then move to feeding your gut microbiome. After that, we'll cover fueling the brain, and finally, we'll dive into the biology of depression. All right, part one, the carbohydrate connection. Okay, so you've probably heard that all carbs eventually break down into sugars, right? Well, true, but your body definitely doesn't treat them all the same way. Take starches, the kind you find in crackers and white bread. They're built with what are called alpha linkages. Your digestive enzymes just tear right through those, quickly releasing a massive rush of glucose into your bloodstream. Honestly, doing that is exactly like drinking a soda. But then you have fiber, the stuff in veggies and whole grains. Fiber is built with beta bonds, and your body actually can't break those down. Because they're indigestible, they drastically slow down the release of glucose. It keeps your whole system perfectly balanced instead of sending it on a crazy roller coaster. Now, what happens when you're constantly hitting your system with those fast, high glycemic starches and sugars? Well, your pancreas has to pump out a hormone called insulin to manage all that blood sugar. But over time, if you just keep overloading the system day in and day out, your cells, especially your muscle and fat cells, they start getting less and less responsive to it. It's kind of like the boy who cried wolf. This leads to a really dangerous condition called insulin resistance. Your pancreas keeps frantically sending out insulin, but the cells just start ignoring it, which leaves both your blood sugar and your insulin levels chronically elevated. And the real-world fallout from this cycle is something called metabolic syndrome, a dangerous constellation of symptoms that includes things like high blood pressure and an increased waistline. To put that into perspective, a staggering 32% of the US population actually has metabolic syndrome, over a third. It's a massive systemic issue that's rapidly increasing all over the world, heavily driven by poor carbohydrate metabolism. Moving right along to part two, feeding your gut microbiome. Let's take a trip down from the bloodstream and right into your digestive tract. You have an absolute wilderness inside of you. Your gut microbiome is this rich, complex ecosystem made up of literally trillions of bacteria, viruses, and fungi. And here is the secret to the whole shebang. Those trillions of microbes in that internal wilderness actually rely on the dietary fiber you eat to survive. When your gut bacteria digest that fiber, they produce these incredible short-chain fatty acids, like butyrate, which do amazing things. They nourish your gut barrier, boost your immune function, and can even help prevent the kind of inflammation that leads to cancer. To show you just how fast this all works in the real world, let me tell you about this fascinating recent study. Scientists actually swapped the diets of two groups. They gave a high-fat, heavily processed Western diet to rural South Africans and a high-fiber, plant-based diet to African Americans. Within just 2 weeks, 14 days, you guys, the results were dramatic. The low-fiber Western diet essentially starved the gut bacteria, killing them off and causing a measurable physical increase in colon inflammation. It perfectly and kind of scarily highlights how fast a processed diet can damage our internal ecosystem. So, I know what you're thinking. What should we actually be eating then? Well, gut-friendly foods contain polyphenols. These are naturally occurring antioxidant compounds found in things like tea, coffee, dark chocolate, and fresh veggies, and they actively increase your bacterial diversity. On the flip side, we have our diversity destroyers. We're talking whole milk dairy fats, sugar-sweetened sodas, and low-fiber processed foods. These foods literally starve your good bacteria and leave you with a much weaker, less diverse microbiome. But hey, it's not just about feeding the bacteria you already have. You can actually eat foods that parachute new, good bacteria directly into your gut. Fermented foods are these ancient, brilliant delivery systems teeming with helpful probiotic bacteria, microscopic allies like lactobacillus. Adding things like kimchi, sauerkraut, tempeh, kombucha, and low-sugar yogurt to your diet introduces these helpful microbes directly into your system, bringing real vitality to your digestive tract. All right, let's move on to part three, fueling the brain. We're shifting our journey upwards now, moving from the rich ecosystem of the gut all the way up to the body's ultimate high-performance control center. Now, despite making up only about 2% of your total body weight, your brain consumes up to 20% of your entire energy resources. It is incredibly resource-hungry, requiring a massive steady supply of glucose just to keep the lights on and keep you functioning. Which brings us to a huge question. If we assume we're getting enough calories overall, how does the specific type of fuel we consume physically alter our mental state? Because it's not just about the sheer quantity of energy. It's entirely about the exact quality of our diet. To figure that out, we've got to talk about neurotransmitters. These are the chemical messengers carrying signals between your neurons, and they manipulate absolutely everything. Your mood, your sleep, how well you pay attention. But here's the real kicker. Your body has to build these neurotransmitters directly from the amino acids found in the proteins you consume. Your diet is literally shipping the raw materials and building blocks for how you feel and behave every single day. And let me tell you, your brain is incredibly picky about how that fuel gets delivered. The frontal lobes of your brain are so sensitive to drops in glucose that if you eat a high glycemic food, like, say, a couple slices of white bread, it causes a rapid glucose spike followed by a really severe crash. When that blood sugar shoots down, your attention span and your mood are dragged right down with it. You know that post-lunch apathy you sometimes feel where you just can't focus? That is the tangible, biological effect of food temporarily shutting down your optimal mental function. Which leads us to our final section, Part 4. The biology of depression. Since the fuel you give your brain directly dictates how it functions, it makes perfect sense that physical, biological disruptions in these systems can manifest as serious mental illnesses. Now, it's really important to differentiate between temporary feelings and a clinical condition here. Almost everyone feels down from time to time, right? Maybe a rainy day or a bad grade brings on a temporary situational sadness. But clinical depression is a totally different beast. It is a severe medical disorder that lingers for at least 2 consecutive weeks. It absolutely won't go away just because you want it to, and it significantly interferes with your ability to work, to play, and to love. When we look at the psychiatric guidelines, to actually qualify for a diagnosis of depression, you must experience at least 5 specific symptoms. These range from a persistently low mood and a loss of interest in things you used to enjoy, to appetite changes, sleep disruption, and poor concentration. But remember, those are just the behavioral symptoms. Depression has actual physical manifestations inside the brain that you can literally see on an X-ray, like smaller frontal lobes, and on a microscale, a severe depletion of key neurotransmitters like serotonin and dopamine. Just to put this illness into perspective, right now, close to 10% of adults in the United States are struggling with depression. It is the leading cause of disability in the entire world. It's incredibly common, yet it is still so widely misunderstood, largely because it's an invisible illness, compared to something obvious, like a broken arm. And here's a truly heartbreaking statistic. Because of that invisible nature, and because of the enduring stigmas still surrounding mental health, it takes the average person suffering with a mental illness over 10 years to finally ask for help. A whole decade of suffering in silence, simply because the symptoms are so intangible and often accompanied by feelings of immense guilt. So if you have a friend or a loved one who's struggling, what can you actually do? Well, there are a few very practical, actionable steps you can take. First, avoid comparing their struggle to normal sadness. Saying, "I know how you feel, I was sad yesterday," usually just makes them feel guilty. Second, and this is absolutely crucial, openly asking someone about suicidal thoughts actually reduces their suicide risk. It doesn't plant the idea in their head. And third, assist them with specific small tasks, like actually looking up a local therapist, because to someone with depression, those first tiny steps can feel completely insurmountable. I want to leave you with a quote that really hits the nail on the head and reinforces what we've learned today. Depression is a medical condition, just like asthma or diabetes. It's not a weakness or a personality trait. It is deeply, fundamentally rooted in the physical biology of neurotransmitter depletion, gut microbiome health, and hormonal abnormalities. And the good news is, there are very effective medical treatments and therapies out there to help boost those brain chemicals back to exactly where they need to be. So, as we wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with one final provocative thought. We've traced this incredible path from the complex carbohydrates on your fork, down into the wilderness of bacteria in your gut, and all the way up to the neurotransmitters firing in your brain. If your mental health is quite literally built on the foundation of your biological health, what are you going to feed your brain today?